1981. So, my father finally passed away. I say finally because he was very old and had been sick for a while. None of this was unexpected. We moved him to a care facility near here a couple of years ago, so one of us could visit him on a daily basis. His house sat empty the entire time he was at the care facility. Now, we are tasked with emptying it out. What follows was included in some papers my wife found while going through his old filing cabinets. Based on what we know of our father's early history before he met Mom, we all think that this was written by him, and that the person described is himself. We are divided on whether this is fictional or real. It doesn't have a title, just the date of September 21st, 1981. It was in a sealed envelope addressed to a paranormal researcher who was active in the 1990s. It was never mailed, obviously. A couple packs of fresh Tareyton cigarettes were what it took for me to get through a day at that lousy job. Every morning I'd get the doors unlocked, flip the closed sign around to say open, and turn on all the lights. That clunky black rotary phone behind the counter would always ring when the clock on the wall showed 8:56. It was Juanita from the home office over in Waldorf, doing her daily check-in, making sure she could tell management that their precious adult bookstore, just a few blocks down from the front gate of the Navy base, was open for business. After that, I'd go out back for the day's first cigarette. The morning this all happened, my lighter stopped working. I got finished with the Juanita call, then headed out to the alley behind the store. If anyone ever asked, I could say I was out there making sure there was no sign of an overnight burglary. Like I said, we were 2 blocks from the main gate to the base, and a lot of traffic in and out of that store was enlisted men. But a lot of the trouble that happened in the county came out of those gates as well, and the kind of literature we sold in the back attracted all kinds of attention. Once, right after I started there had been a break-in. Some fellows from the base had had a lot of drunken fun trashing the place. It was their CO that caught them when they got back, and it was he who reported it. But the management up in Waldorf decided to sweep the whole thing under the rug and not press charges. Can't lose all those customers after all. So, anyway, there I was in the back alley, trying to fire up the first cig of the day, and my old Zippo, the one I got from my dad one time when he came for a visit, finally failed to light. I just put lighter fluid in there the other day, so I knew it wasn't that. Had to be the Flint. I knew Juanita wouldn't be calling again until almost 11. That's when she would always make the second phone call of the day, checking on the store. So I decided there was time to go get a new lighter. I just needed a cheap one that they sold at the store down at the corner, good enough to get me through until I could acquire a new Flint for my old Zippo. Mornings were usually dead anyway. People typically didn't make the trip here until their lunch breaks. I put up the back and 5 minutes sign on the front door, locked it, and turned around. Juanita was standing right there on the pavement in front of me. I knew it was Juanita because I still recognized her from the one time we met, 2 years before at the management office in Waldorf. I had just been hired at the time, and was up there to sign paperwork. I figured Juanita must have been in town that morning all along, and had been sent by management to catch me doing something. I figured she had probably called me that morning from the payphone in the hotel right across the street. All I meant to do was walk down 2 blocks and across the street to the Peebles, to pick up one of those cheap plastic lighters they sell at the front counter, and then head right back and reopen the store. I started formulating all of this in my head so I could blurt it out to Juanita. Looking back, I keep trying to remember how she was dressed. It was a clear day. There was plenty of light that morning. Maybe we were in the shadow of the building? Thinking about it now, I am going to have to go back there and look. I have been meaning to go back for a while now, even just to drive by the damn place. Just to help piece together what happened that morning. The memory is not blurry. It is just that I seem to remember everything that morning suddenly went from being nice and bright to having this veil over it. Everything went into shadow, kind of, with this somber gray veil. The dress Juanita was wearing was just some house dress. Dull floral print, maybe? I remember one dull red splat vaguely shaped like a rose was printed on her dress right over one of her boobs. Not flattering. But I remember her face that morning pretty well, too. Her face did not look normal. Juanita was a little overweight from the one time I actually ever laid eyes on her, back when I was first hired. But when I saw her that morning, Juanita's face was all puffy, almost bloated. One eye and one cheek protruding more prominently than the other. Juanita was not looking directly at me, not glaring with an "I got you" glare. I remember Juanita's head bobbed and jerked around slightly while she stood there, and I could tell the hair on the back of her head was all pushed up and matted, like oily, unwashed bedhead. But her eyes were halfway open and seemed stuck in position, slightly down and to her left. They did not move at all, and did not blink. The lips of her mouth were puffy too, and parted slightly, and also just kind of frozen in place. This situation was awful for me in a couple of different ways. On the one hand, I was alarmed to see anyone from the management office standing there on the curb that morning. As awful as that job was, peddling smut all day, I kind of needed the money, and nobody else in the whole county would hire me for anything at that point in my life. On the other hand, the sight of that person on that sidewalk on that morning was the most unsettling, gut-wrenching thing I had ever seen in my life. I stammered something like, "Just 5 minutes," or something like that, and then she started screaming. I mean, it was like someone threw a switch, and a high-pitched burglar alarm started going off at the back of Juanita's throat. I just kind of stood there, I guess in shock. This went on for a few seconds. Juanita just screamed in this high-pitched, keening wail. Then all at once she stopped, and her face jerked up and her eyes popped open real wide, and her mouth started moving. I remember when that happened, I kind of jumped back very suddenly, and my butt and my elbow connected very hard with the door behind me. Juanita's eyes were wide open, with tiny pinprick pupils. This gurgle started coming out of someplace deep in her throat, kind of like a long, growling burp. Then Juanita's lips started to shift and move around this gurgling sound to form words. "You shouldn't have done it," is what Juanita said to me that morning. That's all she said. I remember I was cold and clammy and sweating while all this was occurring. I remember starting to ask her just what the hell was wrong with her. I wasn't scared of losing the job anymore at that point. I was just very alarmed in general, and I could not figure out why she was acting like this, or what was wrong with her face. I asked her 2 or 3 times what the hell was the matter, starting to yell. Juanita made no reply. Her bulging eyes searched the air past my right shoulder, moving her head from side to side slightly as she did this. Since all this began, her head and neck had become more bloated. The flesh on her face had taken a ghastly pallor. One wisp of black hair floated in front of her face. And I mean it floated, kind of like it was suspended in water rather than blown about by any kind of breeze or gust of air. It was like looking through a sheet of glass at someone suspended inside a big fish tank. Then this terrible low rasp started coming out of her. I realized Juanita was trying to say something else. It slowly started to sound like Juanita was reciting something in Spanish, but this time not to me. It's like she was just saying it into the air in front of her. Then Juanita was gone. I do not mean that Juanita turned and walked off. She did not brush past me and disappear into the store. She did not hop into a nearby car. I did not look away at a distraction and look back and she was gone. I mean, she just vanished into thin air right in front of me in the full light of day. There was no way for me to react to this. I was frightened, but nothing seemed to make sense in a way I could react to. I guess I was in shock. Despite my time in the army, despite having survived automobile wrecks, despite being in bar fights, I had no way to react to what had just happened to me. Still don't. It was like nothing seemed it could be real anymore, like everything was all at once equally ludicrous. The thought of cigarettes and nicotine and a new lighter had completely left my mind, at least for a while. Next thing I knew, I was back in the store, just standing there in the front aisle like customers usually do, with the racks of magazines and the back of the cash register facing me. I don't completely remember going back in. I was wondering what to do, and simply standing there, dumbfounded. Then I snapped out of my daze a little bit, and ran to lock the door. The street was sunny again. There was no sign of Juanita. She was gone. Then I went back behind the counter, picked up the black plastic phone, and dialed the home office. I dialed Juanita. There was no answer, which was unusual. Someone was always at her desk during office hours. I went out and paced the aisles for a few moments. There was, of course, the other number I could call, the one that went directly to management. I had never called that one before. That was actually the last number in the world I wanted to call, for a couple of reasons. I paced some more, and then finally, I did call. First, I tried Juanita again. No answer. I let it ring until the beeping started. I slammed the receiver down, then I picked up the phone again and pressed it to my ear and listened to the dial tone for a few moments. It took some willpower, but I dialed the other number. I slowly turned the dial for each number, then held my breath while the phone on the other end of the line rang. There was no answer. I hung up and sat there in the quiet, with just the sound of the overhead lights buzzing away. My hand automatically went up to my shirt pocket where the pack of Terrytons sat. Then I remembered the lighter. Then I called the police. It took longer than I expected to get someone on the phone who could handle what I was calling about. Waldorf, where the management office was, is in the next county over. The operator had to keep patching me through to some other place, first the other county, and then the state police barracks nearest to Waldorf. I ended up requesting a welfare check on the home office when I did finally get somebody. They told me a state trooper would drop by the main office and make sure nothing was amiss. Corporal so-and-so would get back to me if I thought it was necessary. I said it wasn't, but if they could just drop by, that'd be good enough. There was a loud knocking at the front and I jumped, kicking over the stool that had a box of newly shipped VHS tapes balanced on it, the contents of which went scattering. A man was peering through the front door, with his hands cupped over his eyes to see in. Sports jacket, tie, trilby. I realized the back and 5 sign was still facing the street and the door was still locked. I walked over quickly and opened the door. "Hey, you carry the, anything on computers?" he was saying. I thumbed vaguely in the direction of the periodicals and said we carry the latest copy of Byte magazine. We did also carry normal periodicals up in the front. Regular books, too. Greeting cards and a spinning rack of comic books. The dirty stuff was all in the back behind a wall with a door. As my customer rummaged around, I kept eyeballing the street out front, completely ignoring the guy while he went about his business. I was looking for Juanita. I could not explain it at the time, but I did not want her showing up again. My customer finally got my attention by clearing his throat. I went back and robotically rang him up, wrote the transaction in the blue ledger, then returned to the front door. The guy walked out past me with the morning edition of the Times he had bought tucked under his arm. Something on the front page about a nuclear weapons test France was carrying out that day. I locked the door again behind him and just stood there, keeping an eye on the sidewalk. Lunchtime came and went. The black phone never rang. I did not try dialing headquarters again. The PM editions of the Times and the Sentinel got dropped off just after when the 12 o'clock bell rang at the naval base. When that thing rang, it could be heard all over town. Going out to fetch the bundles of papers from the curb was the only other time I unlocked the door that day, until the squad car pulled up in the afternoon. Please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. And as always, thanks for watching.